Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And today we are doing chapter 16 of A Familiar Death. Marlot saw the attacker coming. The tiger, in his mid-20s, jumped out from between two buildings, claws out, and swiped at him. The attack was clumsy, and he easily avoided it, stepping off the sidewalk and onto the street. Then others stepped out from between buildings or from within them, cougars, wolves, bears, badgers, and more. People he known while living here were surrounding him, and as he tried to keep his distances, what was going on? Before he could voice the question, a leopardess lunged at him and yelled, "Tail raiser!" The attack missed, but not because anything Marlowe did. The accusation froze him. How? How could they know he'd been careful? Trembor hadn't done anything to give them away. It couldn't be because they'd shared one room, unless messing up both beds hadn't been enough. There had been that beam of light, departed slates. What if someone bumped his back, and he almost turned to slash them, but he caught the scent. He smelled his lion with him. Trembor was there. Trembor was also being threatened. The realization broke his paralysis. They were in the middle of a circle of at least 100 people, some pushing to get closer, while others were happy just to watch. None of them were within claws range. They snarled and growled at them with calls. Calls of tail raiser, male lover, abomination, and more that became indistinct. Each word that reached cut him, but he wouldn't let them bring him down, not this time. His fear wouldn't put Trembor at risk. A lynx took a few steps toward him, and Marlowe swiped. "Back off, Banarek!" The lynx stepped back, but not far enough to become one of the crowd. "I knew it," he snarled. "I knew there was something off with you. Now, I know why you spent so much time with that tail-raising wolf. You don't know a damn thing, but unlike Margello, I'm not a defenseless cub." He raised his voice. "And I don't know what you're trying to accomplish here. We're here on the council's order." A quick glance around showed him the crowd was composed of the younger folk. No one above 40 was here. The crowd surged forward, and Trembor's roar pushed them back. "Do not force us to fight back," Marlowe said, his tone calm but loud enough to be heard over their snarling. "We know how to kill." "I saw you," a female yelled out of his view. "I saw it all." Marlowe's ears just folded back as he turned to see her. He knew who it would be. He'd known that voice all his life. Trevor moved with him, staying at his back. The brown-furred wolf came into view, standing a step in front of the others. Her lips were pulled back, revealing gleaming teeth. "I saw you," she spat. "I saw the disgusting thing you let that lion do to you." "Dalea, what are you talking about?" He forced his voice to be calm, even as he remembered that beam of light. Marlowe felt ice form in his blood. For a moment, all he could think about was how his anger had kept him from being careful. He felt his mouth move and form words, but he didn't hear them. All that this was his own fault for being careless. He told Tremble over and over they'd have to be careful, and it was him who'd brought this down on them. "How can you ask that?" Delia screamed and brought Marlowe back to the current problem. Can a sister want to go talk to her with her brother? Didn't it ever occur to you that I might worry about Mom trying to force Finian on you? I thought we could have a talk, just the two of us, have dinner. I could explain things to you. There was grunting, so I peeked in. I saw him do the sound. How much of an idiot could he be not to have thought about that? Normally it was in one of their bedrooms or in the office, which was soundproof, so he didn't have to worry about being loud. "How could you do that to me?" Another female voice. Marlowe glanced in her direction. Russet fur, Finian. "You two are nothing but degenerate." Marlowe growled at her. "Don't you dare say that to him. Say that about him." She spat. Why not? You took it and he gave it. We're supposed to be mated. That was never going to happen. Of course not. You let him shove his. What is the meaning of this? The voice was male and louder than the collective growling and snarling. It was the voice of someone who was used to being obeyed, and the crowd parted to reveal his father standing there in front of his car. He glared at the crowd. Well, I ask a question. What are you all doing here threatening my son? Dad, be quiet, Delia. But she wilted under his glare and she welted under his glare. Marlot was stunned. He'd never expected his father to come to his defense, not with this. I have no idea what you've heard or think you've heard, Kelly said, but this isn't some vagrant committing atrocities behind one of the buildings. He is my son. I will not have you people spread falsehood about him. Is that understood? Marlot's hope died. Of course, his father didn't think they were right. If he did, he'd be the first in line to make his own son pay for it. Kalis glared at the crowd. Go home, all of you. Think on what you almost did here. No one moved. I said, go home! Those closest to him bolted. Those further away didn't run, but slowly the crowd dispersed until it was only the four of them. Dahlia, I said, go home. But Dad, do not argue with me, his father growled. Get in your car and go home. She threw Marlot a hateful glare and stormed off. As for you, young male, get in my car. Your mother and I are going to have a talk with you. I'll follow you, his lion said. His father glared at Trembor. This doesn't concern you. Go back to the city where you belong. Marlot couldn't see his lion's reaction, and Kalis didn't give anything away as usual. But Marlot knew Trembor couldn't be intimidated like that. He's staying. His father sighed in exasperation and pressed his thumb between his eyes. What is it with kids these days and arguing with their elders? I'm 32. I'm not a kid. Then stop acting like one. His father glared him down, and Marlot almost looked away. No one stared back at his father, but he was done backing down. Kalis closed his eyes and took a breath. Don't you see that spending all your time with him is why people think what they do? He's my partner. What do you expect me to do? He wanted to say lover. He wanted to lay it out for his father to confront. Hadn't he told his lion he'd do that? But he'd let him down again. Why did he constantly do that to him? He deserves so much better. I expect you to act like an adult. Him too. This is our family's business. He doesn't need to be involved. So, you want me to leave him at the town's mercy after what just happened? You think they're going to stay away for long? The moment you leave, they're going to fall down on him like a bunch of scavenger. Fine, his father growled. He can follow us. We'll follow you. Ronald said. His father narrowed his eyes. You are riding with me. It's my car. I'm the only one who drives it. Kalis stared at him. Marlot couldn't tell if he believed the lie, and he didn't care. He wasn't spending any amount of time with his father listening to the berating that was coming. Then I'll follow the two of you. I don't like what the city turned you into. I don't trust you not to drive off instead of going home like I told you to. Right, because I'm the trustworthy one in this town. Marlot headed for his car before his father could say anything. As soon as they were in, he drove. Don't, he said before Trembor could open his mouth. Just don't. He didn't want to have to deal with his lion's reproach now. Not when he'd have to endure his father's lecture about appearances being everything, about how what people thought of you mattered more than who you really were. He'd heard them hundreds of times as a cub and young adult. He hated them then. He wasn't going to like them now. He couldn't believe his father was going to lay that down on him again. He was a grown male, his own male. It called him that he was going to have to listen to that again. Wait a minute. How the hell did... Huh. That is interesting. I am going to double check later, but I am pretty sure that is the spelling. Delia's car was parked partly on the driveway and partly on the grass. Typical. She was throwing a tantrum again because their father didn't let her have her way. Marlot had hoped she'd matured out of that while he'd been gone. He parked behind her but stayed on the driveway. His father drove by and parked in the garage. Marlot sighed in resignation. I can stay in the car if you want, Tremor said. No, you're coming in. I'm not dealing with this without your support. Won't my presence make things worse? Marlot snorted. My sister saw us having sex. It can't get any worse than that. Your father doesn't seem to believe her. Maybe you can. What? Call her a liar? What's that going to do? I say that and she'll try to kill me on the spot. He sighed again. Maybe I can get my parents to understand. Well, my father at least. He's a reasonable man. He saw we weren't any different during dinner. His lion nodded and squeezed his arm. Even before Marlot opened the house's door, he heard the screaming. His father and mother yelling at each other. He paused. He couldn't recall ever hearing them fight before. He opened the door and the voices cut off. He reached the dining room and to find his mother standing on one side of the table, Dahlia with her next to her, his father on the other side. His mother's lips were tight-lined. His father was glaring at her. She glared at him. Is it true? His father yelled, cut off Marlot's reply. Of course it isn't. Marlot winced at the volume. She turned her glare on Kalis. So you're saying my daughter lied? That isn't what I said. His father growled. I'm saying she jumped to conclusion, like she has a bad habit of doing. They work together, nothing more. Marlot hunched in on himself. Delia snorted. Her mother turned on her. Delia, that isn't proper behavior. She turned back to her maid. As for you, you haven't even let her tell you what she saw. I don't care. Marlot watched them, horrified at the anger they irritated at each other, the anger he caused. My son isn't like them. Like that. He wanted to say something, anything to get them to stop. I will not have anyone spread such lie about him, not even Daliha. He wanted to run out of the house, go hide in the wood, leave this town, get away from everything he'd caused. He reached back and grabbed Trembor's hand. He held it tightly, gaining some comfort in the contact. You've always been blind to your son's weakness, his mother said. You still think he's going to come right back and take over the commune for you. Well, it's time you realize those tracks are gone. He abandoned you. No, Marlot has not abandoned us. He's out finding his way, and then he'll come back to us. He turned to Marlot. Tell your moth. She turned at the same time and gasped. Dahlia pointed to their hands. See, I told you. Killy seemed confused by what he saw. His mouth opened and closed as he tried to say something. How could you? He eventually managed, pain in his voice. Father, Marlot began. It isn't. How could you? His father's voice almost broke as anger filled it. Father, he made his tone firm, even if all he wanted to do was cower under the old wolf's rage. I raise you, Grayless growled. I fed you, I clothed you, I gave you everything, and how do you repay me? You run off. You, word failed him as he indicated their hand, how could you betray me like that? Marlot looked away in reflex, barely stopping himself from running. His lion was here with him. He would keep him safe. Father, that isn't... You, Keyless growled at Trembor. This is all your fault. You're the one who did this to my son. The older wolf stepped toward them. Marlot didn't think. He moved between the two. Get out of my way, Marlot, his father ordered. No. The protest stopped Keyless again. The protest stopped Kalis. Again he looked confused. You'd protect that after what he's done to you? Marlot fixed his father with a stare, but he kept his voice calm. Father, you're overreacting. Overreacting? How can you say that? How can I see you holding your how can I see him holding your hand like you belong to him? Okay. How can you say that? How can okay. Okay, no, okay. Overreacting. How can you say that? I can see him holding your hand like you belong to him. How did I make that a question earlier? Mullet was aware of his lion's hand in his. He had been from the moment he'd grabbed it, and that voice at the back of his mind yelled for him to let it go, that this was how he made things worse. But he hadn't let it go. He hadn't let go. He was done listening to that voice. That was the old him, the one who'd abandoned Margelo to his fate, who'd lived in fear all this time. Margelo wouldn't have wanted that for him. He'd wanted him to be free. Malot was setting himself free now. I'm the one holding his hand, father. I love him. You what? Killis yelled. I love him. He didn't feel any of the fear he'd expected, the fear of the disappointment he'd seen in his father's eyes, in the eyes of the male he had admired even when he was young, even as he decided he'd leave and never come back, of the male he'd still respected to this very moment, when it wasn't disappointment he saw in his eyes, but hate. The old wolf launched for him, claws out. Marlowe didn't think as he grabbed the arm, pulled him along, added his strength to the motion, and slammed him into the wall. His father crumbled to the ground and didn't move. Marlowe didn't want to believe it, even though he'd known this would happen. His father had attacked him, tried to kill him. He'd wanted his father to be better than that. He'd wanted him to be the male he'd admired all those years, but he was just another male, no better than Marjolot's parents. I'm sorry, he told his mother. I just react. The word died in his mouth. She had the same hate in her eyes. This is twice now. I'm starting to wonder. Delia's hips were pulled in erectus, and she was growling. Trembor pulled on his arm. I think it's time we left. Mallet resisted for a moment, then followed the lion out. He threw himself behind the wheel, and for a moment he couldn't think what to do. The realization that his family wanted him dead short-circuited his thoughts. Trembor shook his arm, and Marlot started the car. He made it to the end of the driveway before the thoughts overwhelmed him. His father had tried to kill him. He tried to catch his breath, but it wouldn't come. How did someone survive such a betrayal? Marlot latched onto the flicker of anger he felt. His own father had tried to kill him. He'd wanted to sacrifice his happiness to keep his worldview intact. Who demanded that of his cub, of his adult son? Marlot was his own male now. His father had no right to force his antiquated belief on him. Marlot could be the male he wanted to be, not the one his father wanted. He looked at the road going left to right. To the left was the city, away from this place toward freedom, happiness. To the right, he could be the male he wanted to be. He could do things his way, and no one but Trembor had a right to ask to be included in the decision. His way. Not his father, not this town, and especially not Arleon. Fuck this. He put the turn signal on. And this concludes chapter 16 of A Familiar Death. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one's going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the book as well as the other in the series, they are available on all major e-retailer. If you want to support me, that's on my Patreon, where you can get access to just about everything I've written. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.